Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, thank you for joining us for another episode of All the Angles, the Business of Paddle podcast worldwide, powered by the Hexagon Cup. This week, our objective is to give you, our audience, a unique insight into Premier Padel, understanding its status, its vision, and its commercial realities. I'm joined this episode by Rob Mitchell and David Serrahima. We couldn't have two more high-profile and knowledgeable people talking about the journey that Premier Padel has been on up till now and what it's got lying ahead of it. Robin Mitchell has spent 30 years around sports sponsorship, marketing, and commercial across rugby, football with the English FA, triathlon, and also as well on the agency side, and is now the Premier Padel's commercial director. David Serrahima has another 20 years at Octagon before he joined Premier Padel as the CEO, but he also has tremendous marketing and sales experience across his career through tennis and golf, amongst other sports. Thank you both for joining us. Before we get started, if you enjoy this episode or have benefited from previous ones, please share, subscribe, helps. So, without further ado, first question, let's start with the background, the history. So Premier Padel basically jumped onto the scene around 2022 out of nowhere, really. So perhaps, do you guys have an insight as to what drove NASA and QSI to look at this sport and space? And what was the opportunity and what were the kind of metrics that really got the process and the project moving?
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes. Just a small thing to say that our CEO is David Sutton. I'm just David Serrahima, General Manager, but more than happy to be here. Obviously, on 2022, it was a perfect moment for paddle. During the World Cup in 2021 in Qatar, it was there our chairman and also the president of the International Paddle Federation, because the event itself. And one day they were approached by all the players, men and women, sharing with them all the thoughts about the paddle situation at the time, owned by a private company as a closed circuit and mainly played and focused on the Spanish markets. It's also true that they were open in other markets, but they approached both of them looking for some advice and looking for some help. And obviously, our chairman is a lover of paddle, also in the sport, and being also the president of the International Federation out there, it was the perfect moment for joining efforts together with associations and to launch Premier Padel together. QSI, through our chairman, helps to grow the ecosystem of the sport globally, but also FIP through paddle. And the main goal, it was the freedom to help the players create a new platform and a new property. But yeah, we all started during the World Cup in Doha back in 2021.
And what was missing in the proposition that existed beforehand? What was it Premier Padel felt that they could provide and promote that wasn't really being done up until that point?
Okay, I would say that we all know that our chairman, it was a tennis player, and he fully understands the mindset of any professional athlete, and also the president of the International Padel Federation. It's very close to players, and both easily agree that all the project, it was about the freedom of the players. We expected the players to be free to play in some different events, obviously always being Premier Padel the main one, but it was about the freedom of the players. It was also the opportunity to create a big platform, to give the opportunity to them to play in the best conditions ever. And that's something that our chairman, CEO, the president of the international is always remembering us, that we need to make the standards at high level. And we put together the men's and the women's playing the best conditions and in a unique facilities, in a unique venues like Roland Garros or the Foro Italico or in some others. It was the combination between giving the players the freedom, also on making the best tool possible, and making the events in the major cities and in unique venues.
I think, yeah, David, just to add, providing that global stage to shine a light on the tour and the players was a real key part of the creation of the tour.
Totally agree.
And so you've both alluded to the players. David, you mentioned FIP. And I remember when the announcement was made that those relationships with FIP and the relationship with players through the player associations was seen as a really critical component of what was being presented to not just the players, but also, of course, to the ecosystem, to the fans. Why was it so important to get those two bodies involved in this project? And how has that really evolved and benefited the product?
That's the key part of the project. The International Padel Federation is the governing body of the sport. They, let's call it, they own the sport. And there is a perfect partnership with QSI for joining together the efforts, commercially speaking, and as a governing body for launching the property together as Premier Padel. But the third part involved are the players. And that's why we joined efforts all together, QSI, the International Padel Federation, and the players, in order to be able to build the strongest tour and the best tour possible. There is always some different views depending of who talks too, but it was a key part to get all together in the same table for making the property grow. And I have to say that launched in 2022, but we have more than 500 players playing Premier Padel. That's in the first year. That's a big number and it's a big compromise. And we are always working together with Flip, also with the NAs. The National Federation are also key because we want the sport to develop globally. And we are all working together. And as again, always in the same table, different views, but always fighting for one common goal, that is to get the strongest tour and the leading tour on the marketplace.
And Rob, turning to you. So you, at some point in 2022, maybe a little bit earlier, were enjoying I'm sure, a sedate life at pitch. And suddenly you got a phone call or an email. I'm not sure how much power you had in that, whether you were just farmed out to Premier Padel or you were asked to, if you wanted to join Premier Padel, but suddenly you got thrust into this sport that probably hadn't figured too much in your background up until that point. So how did you and Pitch get involved in this tour, and how has your role evolved? I remember speaking to you a year and a half back where you were, I think at the time you were still already the commercial director, but you were also creating the schedule and talking to various potential stops on the tour. Your role has been fairly broad and evolving. So I'm just interested in your personal journey.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and thanks for inviting us on the podcast. I think from that conversation over 18 months ago, you'll know that we don't do sedate lives at Premier Padel. We have a full agenda and we're pushing very hard. But you're right, at the start of the initial idea during the World Cup in Doha in 21, I was Pitch International, the sports agency in London, who do a lot of media rights work with beIN and with Qatar. And I was consulting on a Qatar project at the time. And then the brief to come in and develop a commercial framework for this new tour around sponsorship and media rights. I even remember writing the first brief for the development of the new name and look and feel back in January 22. And then I think February 1st, 2022, I jumped across from Pitch International to Premier Padel to focus as commercial director on the promoter agreements, on sponsorship, on media rights. And as is the way with any startup, there's been a lot going on in that short space of time, working across all of those different elements, developing the calendar. And I think just a kind of quick moment of reflection, when we finished the tour finals, the Qatar Airways Premier Padel finals in Barcelona in December, it was a real moment that in a very short space of time, we've gone from no events and no tours through to a quite extraordinary season finale in Barcelona. And a lot of time and effort had gone in from everyone across the team. And then equally, even 2 weeks ago, we had a session with all of the Premier Padel team and all of the FIP team together in Madrid for 2 days, setting out their plans for the year ahead. And I think that's quite a momentous occasion, really, in this short lifetime, and really very uplifting as well, hearing from all the team who are kind of all operating together. So it's been quite a packed few years.
And you had to make that decision, Rob, right? You obviously got the opportunity to work through Pitch for a certain amount of months on Premier Padel, but to make that jump is quite a big commitment. And it shows that you believed in the product, you believed in the project. What was it about what you'd experienced at Premier Padel that made you think this is a real go? I really want to focus on this full time.
It's a really rare situation when you've got the culmination of a new, fast-growing sport. You've got the creation of a global tour. You've got partnership with the International Federation. You've got the Olympic ambition that the sport has. And then you've got the involvement of all the top players in the world from the outset of this project. That doesn't happen very often in anyone's careers. So I think that absolutely the vision to go, yeah, this is going to be something quite special, and then really jump in with both feet. It was a bit of a no-brainer. It's not to say that there's not been a huge amount of hard work, and there continues to be a lot of hard work, but ultimately you need that vision, you need that passion for the project. Anyone involved in the project needs to be part of that. And I think culturally, that's an important kind of step for everyone joining the team, actually, is do they buy into what we're trying to build here?
And I wanted to, David, you touched upon what existed before with the World Padel Tour that was owned by Australia Dam, the big company from Spain. So the relationship when Premier Padel joined the scene was obviously quite fraught. There was a serious tension. There was some legal issues that were bubbling away for the year or so that you guys were both on the scene before the acquisition was completed. What was the lead up to that acquisition? Was that acquisition almost planned from the very beginning? It was inevitable? Or did it feel actually that as the relationship evolved, became clear that was the only way that Padel was going to really step into the next phase? There was going to have to be a consolidation rather than having two separate tours.
At that time, I was not on Premier Padel. I don't have all the insights on how the conversation it went, but it was clear from day one that QSI and the International Padel Federation wanted to join efforts for having their own circuit, and they were always open to have a conversation with the ownership of World Padel Tour. And they were talking openly in different ways, and they finally agree in some way. And that's why we are now actually the only tour and backed by the International Padel Federation. That I think that's the main asset that we actually have. But as I said, I was not there. It was in the beginning of the process. But I know from the management is that we were always open to talk and to find a way to make it work together. And that's why finally we agree, and now we are here.
The last question I've got on history is really the history of the players. So obviously with the World Padel Tour and the various international tours that existed since probably the 80s, there have been various legends, various historic players who have really sat at the top of the game. As sophisticated as the game or as the tour was at that time, they were the best. Does Premier Padel think about how to integrate those legends and that history into the narrative of where Premier Padel, because Premier Padel is the latest and hopefully the future chapters of this sport, but the initial chapters are also quite important to recognize and respect and appreciate and weave into the story. Tennis obviously has a rich narrative that really calls upon the Borgs and the Nastasis and all of these players through to Beckers and Agassiz and Sampras's. Is this something that Premier Padel thinks about and looks to integrate more in the future?
Yes, no doubt on that. We really love the heritage of the sport. We are still a young sport, but as you have said, there are a lot of legends of the sport that they can add a lot of value on our new view of the productivity. We are always thinking on growth and on a global scale and moving paddle everywhere in the world, but we cannot forget the Spanish background of the sport and the Latin part of the sport, and also the legends that they have been building the sport for many years before we arrive, and we have to get all our respect to them, and we'll be more than happy to get them engaged in some different projects that we are actually developing through our player service team. And definitely we want them to be engaged, because sometimes we are saying that we are close to a startup and we are still listening, learning a lot. And I'm sure that these people and these players that has been on tour for many years, they have a lot to share with us and to help us to grow and to learn. And again, fully agree on this heritage piece and to get the legends of the sport engaged with our day-to-day decisions.
And I think maybe, David, just to add, I think as we build not only the global tour, but we're building an international team, and we're bringing people with different skills, with mindsets, and experiences of the sport. And David is there in Barcelona and spends time in Madrid, and I'm based out of London. The ability to walk down Oxford Street in London and realize that not everybody is thinking about paddle all the time.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important sense check for us as a global tour, that make sure that we're taking the views of the legends of the game. We're crafting the sport in the right way, but also building for new audiences and new markets coming around. Important piece, and a piece of work that we're also doing with our partners. And I guess we'll talk a little bit about Red Bull a bit later, creating new programming. How do we tell the stories of the players? How do we tell the stories of the legends of the game? And we're just starting out in that journey, but absolutely it's important.
And talking about legends, let's just remember what we did in Barcelona with Bela. On the last day that he was playing there with the piano and the music. For me, it was a unique moment for us. Not only because Bela itself and what he represents for our sport, it was on the way that we make thanks to him for all the job that he has been doing for the last 30 years in paddle. And again, it was because we fully respect heritage and the legends. And it was a very nice moment, by the way.
So do you see players or ex-players, ex-legends contributing, shall we say, in the boardroom, quote unquote, with shirts and jackets about the management, the direction, the strategy, the branding, the messaging, all those kind of, shall we say, more corporate, more governance, more business aspects of the future of paddle? But also, do you see any opportunity for events and contribute on or around the court as coaches or team captains or players, or a legends tour, even like we've got in tennis? There seems to be a big appetite for retired sports people to still be rolled out onto the field of play and still compete and harken back to those glory days. Do you see something like that potentially, both of those avenues being something that might appear in the horizon?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would say that the answer is yes. Actually, we have some of them that they are opening academies, like Bella itself, that it's already opening academies. But I'm sure that some of them will love to be engaged with paddle after their professional life as a player. There will be plenty of opportunities everywhere in the world, not only as a coaches, not only as academies, but because our ambition is to grow as a sport. I'm sure that as a commentators or as organizers or as other working with other brands, there will be plenty of opportunities for them for sure. And yeah, I fully agree that some of them
And
will be engaged.
Alex, yeah, we also have legends in the commentary box. We have legends on the coaching benches. We have legends working for some of the key suppliers, some of the key technical brands in the industry. So they're not far away. They're either partners of ours, they're close collaborators of ours, and we will always seek to take the views of many people. We want to build as strong a product as possible.
Let's turn a little bit closer to where we are today. Let's look at the last year or so. As you said, Rob, the team has developed and grown pretty rapidly. Can you talk us through a little bit? At the beginning of the year, there was some fluctuation in the leadership of the team and of the project. And now you're talking about this big offsite that you had in Barcelona a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, even, with a significant number of staff. Can you talk us through how the resourcing of Premier Padel has evolved since you started to where you guys are now as a team?
But David is probably the best place because he's a driving force. But certainly we've evolved from a very few people who've come from different entities who are close to the chairman, from people from BN Sports, from Pitch International. As mentioned, we've got extra agency support being involved. And really we have to build the team at the right time as well, because, of course you can't build a team of 20, 40, 50 people right at the very start. We need to build the requirements and develop the model. But as we do that, we understand the different skill sets required, the different expertise that we need, because we can't just have all the same people join as well. And now David I'll spare his blushes, but he joined us very happily. He was originally on the other side of the fence, and David and I have had many.
We have been fighting a lot in the past.
We never fight. But as David is as a promoter in Spain, but then joined us last summer as our general manager. And David, if it's fair to say, one of your key strategic goals is really driving that growth in the team. And maybe that's a handover to you.
Thank you, Rob. I fully agree with all your comments. As we have been sharing with you, we finished the first ever meeting, putting everyone together in a room in Madrid for 2 days, where we share all our views, our ambitions, our concerns, and it was a fantastic day, a couple of days. I always said that we are all working on a double remote because, as Rob has said, we have people around the world working at different offices: Madrid, Barcelona, Italy, UK, London, France. But on top of that, we are traveling around because 25 tournaments worldwide. Then it's a double remote because it's not easy at all to meet everyone in the same room. But talking about the team and the project, one of my I would call it dreams or goals. It's to build the more trustable team in the sport marketplace. And to build trust, it's a challenging one because you have to earn it and you cannot buy it. But I'm fully convinced that all the talent that we are putting together as one team, it's the right group of people to develop that project. And I'm more than happy about these days in Madrid where everyone is put together, a lot of energy and a lot of long views on some specific areas that we want to grow. And it was really a key moment for everyone.
And let's drill a little bit into the commercials of the tour. So which parts of the commercial revenue pie do you feel is where you think it should be, where it needs to be, is in a healthy position? And which of the revenue streams needs some extra percentage points in the overall scheme? What really need to grow, really are the next areas of focus for you guys to develop?
We continue to be restless. We're always looking for that drive for growth. And that growth is not only across the tour or across the tournament, but it's also across our commercial program as well, to invest back into the tournament, to help elevate standards, to go to new places, to really grow the overall ecosystem. So really what I believe is a good start so far. And I think, but I don't take that lightly. We're revenue coming from our hosting licenses, from broadcast media rights revenue, from our partnership revenue as well. And we've got a mix of brands who are coming into the sport, new brands to the sport, global brands such as Qatar Airways, such as Red Bull. We've got endemic brands as well, such as the World Padel on apparel and racket side. And some of the endemic brands around Mejaset, Mondo, Wilson, World Padel, they're not only partners, but they're also licensees as well. So we're developing our licensing program as well. And I think that's an important piece. How do we create presence, build the Premier Padel brand? How do we get it in the hands of fans and consumers and create those experiences? We need to create a direct-to-consumer platform around our e-commerce with consumer products, creating branded experiences as well. We're looking into the creation of the betting marketplace. We're looking into documentaries. We're looking into creating gaming solutions. So there's many different component parts which we haven't even started yet, but we're at the start of those journeys. What's been really interesting is obviously those early stage conversations around commercial, particularly being in London. For some, it's been a relatively open door. People are keen to understand what is going on around the sport of paddle. I think what we're seeing, a lot of corporates have probably now heard of the sport, have probably played the sport, and now beginning to understand what is actually happening. And now we've got consolidation in the marketplace with the global tour. We can really tell a strong story, given we've just completed our first season. The numbers are very strong. We're being broadcasting in 242 territories around the world. We've had live audiences in excess of 100 million people in the last season. We've got strong highlights. The highlights are performing strongest in America, which are different to the live broadcasts. And all of a sudden, we're opening up new markets with all of the things that we're doing. Now, this helps us create an even a richer story as we engage with people here. Some people are just exploring a bit about the sport and the tour and where the opportunities sit. And one of the other things I didn't touch on actually is a large part of our commercial program is also they're supporting our promoter partners. It is really important that we can make sure that they have strong tournaments, generate revenue. We make introductions all the time. we're not precious to try and keep everything for ourselves. It's important that we can
Yeah.
bring that investment into the whole ecosystem.
That's a very important point, Rob. The one that you mentioned, it's about the promoters, because sometimes we talk a lot about the QSI, FIB, and the players or the associations, but we cannot forget that in the end, the promoters, the tournaments, are the ones that are delivering the events that we are having worldwide. And they have the challenge to attract new brands to the sport and also to players at the end. And as Rob has said, one of the key priorities for us is to attract global brands. Endemics are still there. We have very good partners as Qatar Airways and Red Bull, but still making a learning process to attract more non-endemic brands that in some territories still doesn't know quite well. Maybe they know the property, Premier Padel itself, but we also need to help them to understand about our sport, our ambition, and why they should be engaged with Premier Padel as a property, because the other properties are also making good numbers on TV and doing great events, but there is a why behind why Premier Padel is the right property to engage that we are working really hard through Rob and the team.
Yeah. And I think maybe the two missing bits, from what I was saying, the two big areas for us to really focus on now, and work is very much in play, is around our kind of data strategy and building our digital ecosystem. So from websites to apps to player portals, to ensure that we've got addressable consumer data that we can then build and really drive the commercial program through data. And equally, then there's the grassroots of the game. There's much talked about the growth of paddle, and a lot of that is happening in and around the clubs around the world. And it's how we connect the grassroots of the game with the elite of the sport as well. And so that's a really important one, which has all sorts of challenges across digital, across marketing, around making the tour accessible and visible through our broadcast as well. So there's lots of things there for us to work on.
Yeah, talking about grassroots, obviously the Cupra Fit Tour is a key element too, helping the young generations to enter to the professional paddle. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah, and just on that last point, Rob, when in my time in esports, one of the kind of easy conclusions that were trying to be reached was that if lots of people enjoy playing computer games, they'll love watching the best play computer games. If you love gaming, you'll love esports, and that connection is not as strong as the industry would like it to be. And I see paddle as a participation sport going gangbusters, right? Clubs popping up, can't be fast enough, federations popping up, participation numbers going through the ceiling. How do you feel we can create a better connection between those people who love playing the game, who love going to their local club and playing for that hour or an hour and a half, doing that social, playing in that community, to get them to really engage with the tour, with the Lebrons, with the Galans, with the Delphis, with the Martitas of this world? Because it feels like there's still a bit of a disconnect that's perhaps bigger than it should be. And that's, as you said, that challenge is to grow that translation pipeline.
I think there's many parts here, Alex. That's part of creating the global tour. We're going to new markets. We're holding tournaments in countries that haven't held tournaments before. And there's more tournaments. We're obviously entering the US this year. We obviously want to push out to Asia. We want to have something in the UK, as an example, and Germany. All of this is an important part of how do we drive that reach, access, and visibility for the elite part of the sport. It's the classic mantra that sits quite often around women's sport. If you see it, you can believe it. And so all of these different parts, from the broadcast to the streaming to the digital products to the social media strategy, are important for really lifting a lid on the elite of the sport, the professional sport, and seeing the unbelievable skill that these guys play. I think the top social media post last year was a winner from Galan in Santiago last year. And I was fortunate enough to be in the venue at the time, and it was a jump out your chair moment. It was just extraordinary skill. And I think we got 20 million people watching these clips. It's hugely exciting, but I'm also not complacent. Again, being in UK, play at the local club and Paddle Hub Slough, really want to try and make sure that the people there are aware of Premier Padel, are watching it on TV. We've done some play watches in clubs. We've been working with the guys that play Tomic as well. So it's all many different component things that really help us drive that reach, access, and visibility, and close the gap from the grassroots to Premier Padel.
And I'm conscious that content creators and influencers and YouTube streamers, these are people who are now being leaned on more and more as the gateway into new audiences, into greater fandom, into deeper engagement. There are endemic examples. There are people like Pablo from Fourth Set and various other people who are able to do some of that bridging. Is a greater relationship and a great interplay with these kind of content creators, endemic ones, but also non-endemic. You look at someone like Ibai, who is an incredibly powerful Spanish-speaking content creator. My understanding is he's quite a keen paddle player as well, to try and use these individuals, whether endemic or non-endemic, give them access, give them rights to really help them promote the sport to these new and especially younger audiences.
I think paddle has a really extraordinary opportunity. It's a sport that is either the second favorite sport or the favorite sport of sports stars and entertainment stars. They play it on their holidays. They play it in their spare time. So we have this non-endemic kind of audience who are playing the sport, who can tell stories about the sport. And we've been working with that across our tour. We've held exhibitions with the Formula One drivers around the Qatar Formula One Grand Prix. We held that similarly around the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that. But also we're working with influencers who are endemic to the sport or not. That authenticity is really important. These guys have a real passion for the sport. They're playing it, and they're playing it a lot. Yep. And I think, we harness that opens up new fan groups. So we're looking at these strategic alliances. Part of the pre-season activity they did with Paris Saint-Germain last year, we put a court in at Parc des Princes, and Qatar Airways ran their pre-season activity all around paddle. And that helped elevate the Paris Major with the French Tennis Federation. We've got the footballers involved. We've got this really quite extraordinary opportunity. But yeah, working with influencers is a very much an important part of our communication. It can't all be on the players. We need to pull all these levers in order to elevate the sport, to bring it to new audiences, and tell the story of the elite.
I'm fully agree with you, Rob. I would say, but the most of the sports athletes out of paddle, their second sport is actually paddle. If you ask the tennis players, the football players, the F1 drivers, which are their preferred second sport, probably is paddle. That's why that combination between endemic and not endemic ambassadors or influencers is key for us, because we can attract and keep working with our niche market as paddle, but also through these second sport athletes, we can attract new audiences worldwide in a different way. And we are, as Rob said, working in that double strategy with Jasmine and her team, that they're doing an amazing job on that territory.
And one of those is also the Red Bull. We've created our Red Bull TV studio, so around our majors, and we've had the likes of Sally Farquharson involved in the studio, providing some match analysis on the games. And I think that's just another step forward where we're using different knowledge and expertise from around the industry, bringing them into Premier Padel to help tell our story and educate new fans coming to the sport. I think that's really important. It's happening with an English voice at the moment. And yes, if we can do it in other languages, we absolutely will be able to do that. But these are big steps forward. And as a result, we have greater engagement in those shows because we've got the TV studio from Red Bull TV. So it all helps itself.
Yeah. And when we are talking about new markets, that's even more important to use these non-endemic ambassadors to help us to attract new audiences.
I wanted to spend a bit of time on the promoters. As you mentioned, you wanted to underline their importance. Can you just outline a little bit about what the proposition for event promoters is? It's difficult to put on an event. It's difficult to bring people in, get the audiences, bring the sponsors in, maybe corporate hospitality. So what is the proposition that is presented to potential or existing promoters? And specifically, can you talk a little bit about the longevity of the relationship? Because in tennis, when I was working at the ATP, we sold sanctions, and those were significant long length assets, frankly, which gave you a guaranteed position, guaranteed tier of event, guaranteed space in the calendar, guaranteed duration of event. and with the commitment of the players, a certain guarantee about the quality of the players that were going to come in. But it was really that ability to own an asset for a duration that allowed people to feel comfortable, invest, build, and know that if they do something today, they will reap the benefits tomorrow. How does Premier Padel approach promoters? Is it the same way or is it slightly different?
It's quite different, but let me share my view as promoter, okay? Because I've been promoter for many years, not only with Premier Padel, also running some tennis events in the past, among cycling and the others. I think that the biggest opportunity that Premier Padel is putting actually on the marketplace is to be engaged with the most growing sport actually worldwide. That's the opportunity. It's now or ever, let's say, on that way, because there is a big opportunity now to engage on the beginning of the process, on the first years of the project. There are only 25 slots available that are already booked, and there are too many calls happening during the year asking for a slot. There are asking, can we join? And Rob with Guillermo on the FIP side are leading that conversation with future promoters. But I would say that the biggest opportunity that there is actually in the marketplace is to be engaged with as I said, the most growing sport actually, also because our proposal, as you have said, is not the same that ATP, that you have a blocked week and let's say you own a sanction with the license model, but this makes competitive world. And we are helping and supporting all our promoters, but then the other way back, we have a long list of new promoters that they would like to be engaged. And it helps a little to put some pressure to everyone to make that proposition working on the next years.
Yeah, and David, I think, Alex, it's important to remember we just complete our first full season, and therefore the model needs a degree of flexibility that sits in it. We have a licensing model with partners, and we work with 3 different types of promoter. We work with national paddle federations, with national tennis federations who have paddle under their remit, and with private operators as well. And it's important that we have that blend actually as well. And we're receiving kind of inbound requests as well as going out and working with promoters. And it's really important that those promoter partners have a strong vision for what they want their tournament to be, where they've got experience as well. They open up new markets or new territories as part of that. But ultimately, we're building up these tournaments with the players very much at the heart of the requirements and the obligations. So that, because going back to the very start of the conversation, the whole premise of the tour is about elevating the standards in paddle, providing new opportunities for the players, raising the standards on and off court, providing medical support, providing the right accommodation and travel and food and beverage, etc. All of these things are important. The model that we have, there are obligations on the promoter side, there are obligations on the Premier Padel side as well, and there's revenue generating opportunities as well. And inevitably, it's going to take some investment at the start, and then we'll move forward. And we're going through renewal phases at the moment, having been through our first few years.
That's the key decision for us, Alex. We were talking first about hiring the right people on the team and having the most trustable team in the marketplace. But on the other way back, we also need to attract the best promoters to our property. That's something that we are now working very hard in order to be sure that we have the right strategy and the right partnership with the best promoter in every single country in the world, in order to be sure that we could together deliver the highest standard that we want to put on the table in front of the players. And that's something that we now are working in a very detailed process in order to be sure that we choose the best promoters in every city. And every decision that we are making on the promoter side is a very strategic decision that we need to make it carefully and going through a strong process.
Yeah. And I think that with those promoter agreements, I mentioned we need that vision, we need the experience, we need the kind of the countries and markets, but we need that cultural fit as well. And whilst it's important to driving consistency in delivering and relevating those standards, we also want some character, local character around each of those tournaments. When we go to Africa, we go to Egypt and the continent of Africa, the tournament will necessarily be slightly different from one in Brussels. It'll be slightly different from one in Bordeaux. It'll be slightly different from the one in Dubai. And I think that's an important part of the rich tapestry of a global tour.
And that kind of brings me, because you've kind of almost answered this question, Rob, but I was going to say, what do you look for potential hosts and potential promoters? What are the ingredients? You've touched on some of them, but are there, just give a complete list for any potential hosts out there who might be listening to this and who are wondering, what is it Premier Padel is looking for? What's the list?
Yeah, I think there's always some unknowns, and you get that with some conversations, and you get surprised and you go, okay, that's really exciting. But we want promoters who have a vision for their tournament. We want to know it's going to fit with our strategic ambitions to grow the sport, to open up new markets, to go to new cities. Germany is a big conversation at the moment. It's a big racket sports marketplace. It's one of those new markets that we need to open up for the tour. We need the experience on the promoter side as well. I think there are big commitments that need to be made, and we need to be able to work very closely with them. So we need experienced promoters. And the stronger the promoter, the better it is for us and the tour. And then commercially, we need to work very closely with them as well, because we want it to be a success for all the promoters, because that's good business, and it means that we can build strong tournaments as well. And that's good for the players and ultimately good for the fans as well. All of those component parts are key.
Yeah, in my opinion, there are a few. One is the ambition to grow, as we have, because obviously there are many good promoters around the world, and it's quite easy to get the right promoter on the table, but not all of them could get the same ambition that we have as a Premier Padel. The other one is to be able to work together with the NA, with the National Padel Federation. That's a joint that we are always looking for, and also about the brands. As Rob has said, we need to learn in territories where the brands are asking us to be, because they potentially think it's a market that will be able to grow shortly. But as I said at the beginning, that ambition that we have for growing is something that we want to put on the mindset of our promoters, that we need to make the sport grow locally, but also globally, with the ambition that Premier Padel is putting on the table.
So that about wraps up the episode. Please like, share, and subscribe if the content was thought-provoking. Please comment on LinkedIn or Twitter if you have any recommendations around our format, topics we should devote an episode to, questions we should ask, and speakers that we need to bring on. We want you all, those driving the next phase of this industry's future, to tell us what you want to hear about and who from. Thank you, Rob and David, for this incredibly detailed and open episode, and for joining us today. We will keep doing our best to cover all the angles of the business around padel, episode after episode. Until the next one.